Not. Like, bro, you think you're the
Table,
alpha.
screenshots, texts between her and Paul going back 4 months, messages where she called me boring and laughed at Paul calling Cassie pathetic. I tell her Cassie sent them the first.
See what comes
up. I tell her Cassie waited for her to say something, and she never did. My wife grabs her phone and dials Cassie. Nothing. Tries Paul. Voicemail. She runs to the window, and Paul's driveway is empty. I tell her Cassie showed him everything last night. She starts pulling at her hair, saying she'll go to Cassie's house right now. I tell her Cassie changed locks yesterday. My wife grabs the counter telling me I can't do this to her. I set the divorce papers on the table. You told me it was already decided. So is this. My daughter was waving at a grown man across the daycare parking lot, and he was smiling back at her. But the second he noticed me, he pulled his jacket over his face and cut through the side exit. I crouched down and asked who that was, and she put her finger to her lips. That's my secret buddy. I asked my wife about it at home, and she said, she's 4. She probably waved at a stranger and made up a story. I don't care. Something is wrong with that man. I'm going to the police. She snatched my car keys out of my hand. And say what? That our 4-year-old has an imaginary friend? You're embarrassing yourself. I dropped it. But when I was getting my daughter ready for bed, a handful of candy fell out of her jacket pocket. I sat on the edge of her bed and asked where she got it. She held up her pinky. Promise you won't tell anyone. I wrapped my pinky around hers. My secret buddy gives them to me when you're not around. Where does he give you candy? Here, when he comes to help mommy. I gripped the edge of her mattress. What does mommy need help with? He gives me candies and I count to 5,000 while he helps mommy fix her squeaky bed. I thanked her for telling me the truth and kissed her goodnight. I hope she's ready to grow up without a mom. I was in the principal's office when he said, "We know you set off a stink bomb in the boys' bathroom. It's been 2 hours. Just stop denying it." I was more impressed than anything else. But how? I blocked all the known security cameras and did it completely alone. I didn't even tell anyone about it. The principal smirked and said, "We have our ways," before handing me a detention card. So I made a beeline right back to the boys' bathroom because I had to figure out their method. I quickly scribbled a gang sign on a sticky note and waved it around the bathroom to see if they'd catch me. Except this time, I made quadruple sure to only leave when the coast was clear. But somehow the next day, I still landed back in the principal's office. "We caught you again." I leaned in. "How?" He shrugged. "Let's just say, all of the teachers are on alert, one of the perks of the job." But I wasn't giving up that easily. So when he wasn't looking, I turned on the anonymous calling feature and called his phone. His phone rang, but he refused to leave until I said, "I heard Kimberly's mom was going to call you today. Something about a lawyer." He glared at me before leaving. As soon as he walked out, I went behind his desk and saw it. His computer screen was still on, and I saw a grid of live camera feeds on the screen. As I looked closer, I almost vomited from shock. Turns out his perks of the job included cameras angled inside the students' toilet bowls. I heard him coming back, so I jumped behind the desk and just nodded until he was finally done talking. I called the police as soon as I was outside, and the next smoke bomb he saw was in prison. My roommate stole my food for 6 months, so I finally...
It's difficult to deal with
I'm laughing because Junior said I look like Puff
especially
Puff.
when it comes to the health of our loved ones. We have the tools
Puff
to help.
Puff boy.
Cepheid is lighting the way forward, always onward towards better technology and better, faster results that lead to better healthcare. And everyone deserves that.
Yes!
Smells like fresh produce. Delivered daily.
It's an Aldi thing.
Cooked him the meal he deserved. I dropped another ghost pepper into the bowl and kept mixing. Sticky notes, labels, group texts, and a combination lock on a Tupperware had all done nothing. Every time I caught him, he shrugged through a mouthful of my food and said the same thing. "Bro, it's just food." Tonight, I rolled the meatballs and slid them onto the bottom shelf with the usual sticky note. I left the recipe card on the counter and went to my room to wait. 20 minutes later, right on cue, the fridge opened down the hall. The microwave kicked on a few seconds after. By the time it beeped, my bedroom wall was vibrating with the sound of him chewing. He yelled through the wall, "Bro, why have you been hiding these from me?" The front door opened before I could answer. His girlfriend dropped her keys on the counter and asked what smelled so good. He shouted back, "Babe, you have to try these meatballs my roommate randomly made." She picked one up, smelled it, and asked why they looked so red. He laughed. "Bro, it's just food." The next sound was a wet bite, followed by a long, suspicious pause. Both bathroom doors slammed at the exact same second. She started first. A long "eh" came through the guest bathroom door like a fire alarm. He banged on his doors. You poisoned me! I'm calling poison control! I went and got the recipe card off the counter where I'd left it. I read it through his door over her screams, 1 ingredient at a time. 2 pounds of ground beef, 1 yellow onion, 16 ghost peppers. Her howling stopped. Her voice came from the other bathroom, raw and wet. 16! Who put 16 ghost peppers in a meatball? Who is your roommate? I can't feel my tongue. Is this legal? Call an ambulance. Call my mom. I told her through the door. Nobody told you to eat it. The sticky note said, do not eat. Way too spicy. My new stepdad wore his army uniform to Thanksgiving. I called the cops before dessert. When I walked in, Kenny was sitting at the head of the table in full army dress. My aunt grabbed my arm. He's a war hero. Kenny stood up and shook my hand. Good to finally meet you, son. My uncle handed him a beer. Tell Brandon about Kandahar. He just got back from his 3rd tour. He'd love to hear this. Kenny settled back with a humble smile. We were outside Kandahar when the ambush hit. My buddy went down, so I ran through enemy fire and dragged him back. That's how I earned this. He tapped the medal on his chest. My aunt had tears in her eyes. I cut into my turkey and looked at his ribbons. They were in the wrong order, and the badge above them was upside down. I got the Purple Heart when an explosion threw me 15 feet, shot shrapnel into my left leg. I woke up 3 days later in a field hospital, barely able to walk. I looked under the table. He was bouncing that same leg just fine. I set down my fork. Where were you stationed? Fort Jackson. What was your job? Infantry. 11 Bravo. Fort Jackson doesn't train infantry. What unit? 3rd Battalion, 75th Regiment. Mom beamed. He was a ranger. Isn't that incredible? I nodded. Where'd you do ranger school? Kenny took a long drink. Fort Benning. Toughest 8 weeks of my life. That base hasn't been called Benning in years. I pulled out my phone under the table and searched his name in the Stolen Valor database. He'd been reported in 3 states for faking military service. I waited until Mom brought out the pie and everyone had a slice. Kenny, your badge is upside down, and those ribbons can't be together. You learned that on day 1 of basic. He froze. Fort Jackson trains clerks and cooks. Infantry goes to Fort Moore, and that base hasn't been called Benning in years. I turned my phone around and showed the table. You've been reported in 3 states for stolen valor. Mom grabbed my phone and her hands trembled as she read. Kenny looked around the table. I just wanted people to respect me. Mom stood up so hard her chair fell over. You wore that uniform to our wedding. My uncle grabbed Kenny's shoulder. Were you ever even in the military? Kenny stared at the floor. No. I walked around the table. Take it off. You didn't earn it. I picked up my phone and called the cops before dessert. A grocery store fired me, so I stole from them. Years ago, my mom couldn't afford to feed us without the school lunches, and she made just enough to not qualify for food stamps. I was a teenager, just trying to make sure we had food on the table, so I got a summer job at a grocery store. That lasted about 2 weeks when the manager pulled me aside. We had never actually spoken before. He looked at me and said, I just don't like your personality. You're done. I started crying right there and told him my mom was counting on that paycheck for groceries this week. He said I was being dramatic and walked away. When I got home, I emptied my pockets and found the roll of markdown stickers I'd been using that day. They were the ones the store used to mark down anything close to expiring. I sat there staring at them. The next morning, I copied the barcodes onto sticky paper and drove to a completely different location. I walked up to the meat section, grabbed a pack of salmon fillets, stuck a label on it, and took it to the self-checkout. I scanned it with shaking hands. $2. It worked. Once I knew it worked, I started hitting different stores, keeping the trip small and always paying cash. Racks of ribs for $2, big veggie trays for $1, expensive cheese for 99 cents. I hit about a dozen stores that summer. Our fridge started filling up for the first time since school let out. I never got caught, not once. My mom eventually asked where all the grocery money was coming from. I told her I got an academic scholarship. I watched my girlfriend send her entire paycheck across town to help raise her little cousin, and decided she was the kind of person I needed to marry. But she'd told me previously she'd only say yes if I truly proved I was worthy of her love. I looked at her phone the following night, and in her notes saw a photo of a beautiful emerald ring with the words, "Maybe one day," written beside it. I opened a secret savings account without telling her. I picked up extra shifts, delivered food on weekends, and sold anything I didn't need, even skipping lunches at work, because she deserved the world. Finally, I had just enough. I texted her that morning. I have a surprise for you tonight. Be ready. She sent back a heart. I grabbed my jacket, looked at the photos of her and her cousin by the staircase, and headed out. I cut through her old neighborhood toward the little jewelry store she'd pointed out once on a walk. But on my way there, I saw a teenage girl on the side of the road. She was alone and bleeding profusely. Nobody was stopping to help her. I ran to her and called an ambulance. At the hospital, doctors said she needed emergency surgery right now to save her life. But without a parent present or insurance, they needed a deposit before they could start the operation. The amount was almost exactly what I'd saved. I looked down at my phone. My girlfriend's love heart was still on the screen. I looked back at the little girl, who was almost unconscious now. I took out my wallet and paid every dollar. I walked home empty-handed. Nothing.
Spring smells amazing, unless you're allergic to it. When pollen tries to turn your yes into a maybe, reach for Zyrtec. Zyrtec starts working at hour 1 and lasts for 24 hours. So whether you're heading out for a long walk, a tea time, or just opening the windows, you can say yes to the season.
Okay, let's go.
Seize the day with Zyrtec.
To show for the months of work I'd put in. My girlfriend was in the kitchen in her favorite dress, smiling and waiting for her surprise. I couldn't hold it in. I broke down and told her everything. The emerald ring, the little girl, the money. But before I could finish, she dropped beside me. She held my face and kissed me, and while crying said she would marry me. I didn't understand. Then I looked behind her at the family photo by the staircase, and there she was, the teenage girl from earlier, standing right next to my girlfriend as a child. I just saved her life. My girlfriend smiled and said, even though she never got her ring, she certainly got her answer. My dad walked into my room on my 18th birthday and slid a book across my desk. He looked me right in the eyes and said, "It's time you pay your dues." Instead of wishing me a happy birthday, he was demanding I owe him $280,000 for raising me. He didn't even let me speak before sliding a pen on top. I picked up the book and opened it. The first page had a charge for the hospital the day I was born. I looked up at him. He crossed his arms and nodded at the pen. I kept flipping, and everything was listed from the baby formula to the winter coat he bought me when I was 6. My dad tapped the desk. "Just sign it." I turned to the last page and my hands stopped. He'd added today's birthday dinner to the total. The cake my mom baked that morning was listed at $14. I looked up at him and realized that in his eyes, I was just a human ATM. I closed the book and tore it in half. "Do you even love me?" He lunged across the desk and grabbed me by the shirt. "Give me my money." I pulled his hands off me and stepped back. He shoved the torn pages in my face. "If you don't give me what you owe, you are no longer part of this family." "Then I'm not." I walked out of the house with nothing. He followed me to the driveway screaming. I got in my car and drove away. I had nothing, so I worked 3 jobs just to afford a room. And it wasn't until 5 years later, when I was sitting in an office working on my business, that I saw my dad again. I looked out my office window to see him in the parking lot on his hands and knees in a suit picking pennies off the pavement. He couldn't get a single one from me, so he spent his time collecting them off the ground. I grew up in a poor village in Africa, controlled by white settlers. I never understood why they beat us and made us work for them, but when my mother explained it, I remember thinking she had to be wrong, because why would someone believe they were better than me just because of my skin? So instead of just hating the settlers like everyone else, I became obsessed with one question: why? I spent years looking for an answer but never found it, and eventually realized who better to ask than a racist himself. I walked to the house of the man who controlled our village and asked to come in. My mother begged me not to, because she was convinced he'd hurt me. But when I knocked on his door, he opened it. And when I told him why I was here, he was impressed at my bravery and let me in. We sat down, and I asked him why he was racist, and he explained white people were superior, and I didn't argue. I just kept asking why, trying to dig deeper. And with each why, I noticed his answers got shorter. He made a call and brought some of other high-ranking village leaders over. And when I talked to them, I realized these men had been taught to see us as less than before they'd ever had a real conversation with us. For years, I visited and simply talked to them. I disagreed with their views, but never put them down. And a few years later, the man called a public meeting apologizing to our village and announced we'd govern ourselves from now on. My wife called me screaming
Yeah.
and crying. I just found her like this, and
Yeah. Never!
knew what she meant. Our daughter was struggling. badly with mental health, and I knew I needed to get home immediately. I drove to the airport while she was in the ambulance, but as soon as I asked them to put me on the next flight out, they told me I'd have to wait until tomorrow. Everything was booked, and I genuinely had a panic attack. I begged them, saying my daughter might not be alive tomorrow. Everyone was staring, and I was about to completely lose it, but then someone grabbed my shoulder. A guy I had never seen before told me heard what I said and asked what happened. I was confused, but told